Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to start off with some general housekeeping items as people start to come into the conference. If you're here for continuing education credit, just make sure that your Zoom login name is your full name. So for example, GIS Guru 123 will not be accepted for continuing education credit, while Eric Abrams, the full name, would. This afternoon's presentation is titled A Single Scalable Platform for All Your GIS Data. And our speaker today is Eric Abrams, who is a senior project manager of GeoDecisions. Eric has 30 years of DOT experience through his work at Iowa's DOT as their chief geographic information officer and information technology specialist. Eric designed and developed Iowa's DOT automatic vehicle location system, along with nationally known products like Track-A-Plow. Through his work as a GIO, Eric and his team develop databases, processes, and web services to integrate data like digital message signs, pavement conditions, bridge, and NEPA layers, and cameras that allow Iowa DOT to integrate into their enterprise systems. Eric also leveraged SlimJig, which he's going to talk about today, which is a geospatial maturity model to understand the strengths and weaknesses to better develop improvement plans. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our speaker, Eric.
All right, hey, thanks for the introduction. I'm excited to present today on the concept of a GIS data fabric. So anyone that has a GIS environment, you live inside of a data fabric. So I'm excited to really talk about what that is and how you can implement your own fabric at your organization. Let's kind of talk about what a GIS data fabric is. It's a set of data services which provide predictable, reliable, and authoritative capabilities across a choice of endpoints, spanning on-premise, cloud environments to accelerate your digital transformation. So really, what does that mean? So if you look at that little diagram on the left-hand side, the small circles represent data and REST endpoints or URLs. The lines represent the data services, the REST services that you use to integrate, data between things. And the larger circles represent your organization's data standards, software, business processes. You can even argue things like culture and organizational structure impact and influence how you do GIS in your organization. Driving factor, to data fabrics is to provide a single point of truth for your data, and not just that, turning your data into information that people use. So in other words, predictable, reliable, authoritative capabilities, across a choice of endpoints. There are different patterns that can be implemented within this, and each pattern has different technology, standards, and processes, that represents your business's verticals. So let me move on here. That was a lot to get into, but we set that definition there. So let's kind of do an overview of what a GIS data fabric looks like in an organization. So why do you want to do a GIS data fabric in your organization? You want to be able to reduce complexity by implementing data standards, governance, and guidelines out there. Have some type of common security so you don't have 8 different GIS applications, right? And then 8 different logins to log into those applications. How can you get to a common security method so you can start integrating with one single type of login? Helps improve an organization's culture. Things like, are your GIS manager at the right level within your organization? Are you using a federated or centralized approach to GIS? Those types of things that this concept can help improve your organization's culture. It's also inclusive, right? It works to integrate systems, not replace systems. So you look at these little boxes that we have out here, down here at the bottom, these are different systems. Sometimes you have a system that's really good at what it does, and you just need to bolt on a geometry component of those. You don't need to replace that entire system. And basically, a fabric, a GIS data fabric, is customized for you by you as you change these different blocks that are inside this fabric with how you do business. Let's kind of jump into the different components then in more detail. The concept of GIS data fabric is that everything is interconnected. Your systems, data, and not just that, people also need to be interconnected within this fabric environment. Don't throw out your investments you already have, but rather, how can you make your investments go further by following a basic framework? So part of this framework then is services and API. That's one of the cores to this. Services and APIs connect data that make data accessible in common and consistent ways. If you're using an Esri ecosystem, You really need to have authoritative REST services that are open and available within your organizations and outside your organization, so people can integrate data more easily than having to say, hey, I need access to your data, how do I get it? And then you give them a spreadsheet or a shapefile. Get those services out there. Gone are the day of service accounts to connect to data in a database. Get those APIs up so you don't have this database and say, well, how do I get to that data in there? And GIS is an integrating technology, and GIS Data Fabric builds out an ecosystem that uses services to exchange data, as I mentioned before. Next thing is data standards. You must define standards for your data, but not only that, your APIs, services, and data formats all need to have standards associated with them. So, and also data values, data ranges, all that stuff. And that also includes what most people don't like to talk about, metadata, right? Having that metadata out there for your data, so when people download your work or download your files, your data, they know what they're looking at. Working with coded values, global IDs or GUIDs, that type of things. And don't forget guidelines on best practices and accessing data. So you've made this data available, but also best practice documents in order to how can you work with that data internally and externally out there. So now we have data fabric. So that's components we have services API, data standards. And on to our next one is software, security, and culture. So everything is influenced by software, security, and culture. Software is your investment in software. It's really pretty straightforward. These could be systems, desktop or web software. All software has a function and may or may not complement the GIS Data Fabric concept. So you need to review your agency's software ecosystem. So if you're using for GIS, if you're using an Esri ecosystem, make sure you have all the right pieces in place to be successful with your data fabric. Security, as I mentioned before, should be common across the entire ecosystem. Using things like single sign-on authentication is a key concept. One thing when I was at Iowa DOT, when we first brought on like ArcGIS Online, and then we had our ArcGIS database that was using different federated security. So our field staff would go out and collect, and what would happen was they would have an ArcGIS Online username and password. But once we tied that to a single sign-on, the use of ArcGIS Online and access to data and information and the ability to create maps by field staff, different offices just exploded with that common security and component out there. And culture. Is your organization structure property? Do business processes blend together? What are the limitations of those? Is there ample budget to yield cost effective measure? And then also, how mature is GIS in your organization? And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. I'm going to kind of look at this middle piece as kind of the heart of the system. So in there we have let's go from bottom to top. We have data collection. That's where you're going out and collecting data. And as you see, they're wrapped by services, data standards, software security, and culture. That's all that part of that data fabric. So you have data collection. How are you collecting data? There's multiple ways you collect data and then bring it into your system. Your existing systems, the data you collect go into those existing systems that you support inside your framework. And we have this concept of master data management. And the definition of data fabric talked about storing things in multiple environments. So a lot of places say, well, we have a warehouse, right? Well, organizations really should have multiple warehouses that are authoritative, that store data, and some may be cloud-based, some may be on-premise, right? So you need to have this master data management that allows you to store data, make it accessible, and also validates that your security has security and your standards are met. And on this thing, you see this little clock looking right here, right above the master data management ecosystem. A lot of people forget about that fourth dimension. You need to have a time component in there so you can go backwards in time and look at data, look at trends, but also need to go forward in time to look at data. And then the top is where most people, the visualization and reporting and applications, that's where like 80–90% of the people really interact with the data as it flows up from the data collection through the existing systems into some type of authoritative warehouses that are out there. And then from there, you build out these dashboards, maps, apps, things like that from that area. All right, so there's your, we talked about that. And then around the outside of this diagram here is data lifecycle. So as you collect data, Here on the left side, it moves up through your fabric, comes back around, and then you use it for your data collection again. So you collected a fire hydrant, you go out 5 years later, look at that fire hydrant again. So you're reusing and putting in that cycle. So that's the concept of the data fabric. So let's move on. Look at this in a little more detail. So as you see here on the left-hand side, there's a chart we just looked at where it has data collection, existing systems, master data management ecosystem, visualization, reporting. And on the right-hand side, you see kind of the building blocks of those. So you can think about your own environment, you know, and how your little pieces can fit into something like this. So let me take a closer look at this. So this first one here is how data is collected. You know, so you have many different ways you want to collect data. You're using things like spreadsheets. You could be using collector apps from Esri, that type of thing. You want to, you know, leverage the proper collection cycle for your data and then be able to get those into these different systems up here. And these systems really, especially if you're dealing with location, they gotta be integrated somehow with location-based attributes like spatial geometries and things like that. And then any collection down here at the bottom could be anything, like I mentioned before, LiDAR, field tools, whatever you have out there. And we move up to this next layer here is the master data management. As you see here, as the data is collected, it's validated, it moves through some type of ETL, extract, translate, and load process using, I saw a presentation this morning, Safe Software gave something FME, great tool, right? Great tool to validate and move data from these systems down here up into these authoritative data stores. And notice there's not just one. In this scenario, there's purposely two in here to show that you have multiple. One may be on-prem, one may be cloud-based. So you move it on through, and then from there, you use services and APIs to move on to the next phase. Then last, we'll take a look at the visualization reporting. So from there is once you have your structure in place for your warehouses, then from there you can start building your dashboards, enterprise reports, all come from an authoritative location of data. So you have confidence when you pull it and use it, that it's the data and information your department wants you to have, and you can take that and build your products with it. All right, and that's just a high-level overview. You can see how, you know, kind of look at this and how do your parts fit into this? Where are you weak? Where are you strong? You know, and the question is, how do you know? Maybe you know within your organization, but how does the rest of your organization know where you're weak and strong? And that really comes down to the maturity component of GIS Data Fabric. So let's talk about that real quick. So what is a GIS maturity model? And you can see there in the bullet items, maturity model is a tool that helps assess the effectiveness of a person's, group, or organization's current geospatial state. It's really just a report card, right? You all know report cards from school. The GIS maturity model helps your organization figure out the capabilities are needed to improve your geospatial environment. So that's that whole GIS Data Fabric. You know, how do you improve that? And the process to do is pretty simple, right? Yeah, you have questions you were asked, you look at those as and you say, hey, a 1 is not good, a 5 is like ultimate. And so you score these things 1 to 5, and then you wrap the score up to determine where you're strong and weak with your organization. Let's take a quick look at these. So one piece I used at Iowa DOT for many years is the SlimJig component. So if you want to go grab an easy to use maturity model, you go to slimjig.info. You can download their 40, 50 question maturity model, assess yourself, do that types of things. Well, GeoDecisions taken that part of that SlimJig family and expanded it to the SlimFabric, because that's this GIS Data Fabric component, and we've elevated it to work within this environment. So as part of the SlimJig family, it considers the fabric components and provides a deeper insight to what's going on within your organization. So I mentioned that we have SlimFabric, but we also, for the DOT folks that are on the phone, we also have SlimFabric for DOT. So we've taken the Federal Highway Administration's SlimJig version for transportation and actually added the data fabric components on this. You use the test maturity organization, measures for each factor. I mentioned before, scores are used to determine strengths and weaknesses, and it'll give you a high-level overview and give you some direction of where you need to dive deep and put effort to improve certain things. Here's kind of what it looks like. Here's a section on process orientation. As you see, some pretty basic questions like staff or process minded. And in this organization example, they scored as 4, and the green areas over here represent which components of the data fabric do those align to. As you see, that's a pretty well rounded question there. But you go down here to the data maintenance embedded in business workflow, well, this organization has problems, right, with embedding data maintenance together. And so they've scored this whole thing as a 2. As you see here, it's red. It says, hey, let's take a little deeper dive into this environment. Why is that? And what can we do to improve the process? And this is just another close-up view. If you download the slimjig.info, or if you get a hold of GeoDecisions about the SlimFabric, we can get you a look at this. And then again, it scores you, right? You take a look at how you scored. You can even have history in here and look what you did last year and how you compared in the future. And get different charts and things out of it. Then last, here's the data fabric component. So you look here in culture. In this scenario, they're scoring a 2.7. That aligns with this software security culture area over here. And master data management, that's that warehousing kind of component, in this case, 2.5. So as you can see, DRA's visualization, which is 2.4, which is up toward the top. And this organization looks like they may need to put some focus into how they're dealing with visualization reporting. It could be that, hey, they've locked down ArcGIS Online. All these people can't make these visualizations for their customers, right? Maybe it's as simple as I'm working that model through. And then with that, we're going to get the closing, and then we'll be able to take some questions here. Kind of run through these bullet items. In order to assess your GIS data fabric, you really need to start with maturity. I found that maturity modeling, especially simple maturity modeling, is really to understand your starting point. And with that, if you've been with your organization for a while, it's also good to understand your history. You may want to go back and timeline, how systems came into place, when software came into place, and have that bigger understanding of your environment. Really start with that maturity assessment. Use GIS Data Fabric for a strategic look at the enterprise level. What are you doing good? What are you doing bad? That's an honest review out there. You really be honest with yourself. Everyone's trying to do good things, right? Some things just haven't had the attention they need. And so this helps that process, saying, let's give some attention to that so we can make that component the best it can be. Then it helps with platform modernization, to reduce data and information debt. Last thing you want to do is duplicate, I'm going to talk from the DOT side of things, like bridge data. Okay, you do bridge data collection. You have an authoritative thing you send to the feds, but all of a sudden you're putting out a different set of data from a different office that's not necessarily authoritative. So you really need to reduce that data and information debt for your organization. And this concept helps with that. Again, master data management can have multiple repositories. So, hey, there can be multiple. You could have, your own SQL Server database here. That's a repository for something. But at the same time, ArcGIS Online could also be an authoritative repository for things. And that's a cloud-based. Really need to hammer home the whole thing about services to connect your data. Without services, then you're still going to fight the whole, I need access to your data. How do I get there? I got to make a database connection. My software doesn't do that. It's web-based, so on and so forth. And also review your culture. Are the people in the right places in your organization? Do you have training plans in place that really can bring up that GIS knowledge within your organization? Is there budgets assigned to GIS software and offices? So really taking a look at that, reviewing that culture and moving on. All right, and with that, I could have talked a lot longer, and I decided to move as quickly as I could through this so we have enough time for questions on this. So I'll go ahead and, how do we do questions here?
Yeah, so I can take them in the chat and then communicate them to you, or you can view the chat for the questions. I did forget to mention that at the start. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them into the chat and we'll take them in the order that they're received.
Everyone's ready for door prizes is what they're ready for.
Or you did a really great job on your presentation and just gave all inclusive information.
Everyone's like, oh, it's the last day, last session.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like we're not having much, so,
Yeah. There you go. So
Oh, yeah. Oh man, yeah, you're hit me in the heart here, right? I spent 30 years at Iowa DOT. Oh yeah, that was always a thing. Everyone had their turf, that they would guard. And one of the terms I used, I'll give you this Ericism here. I always called when people are orgs or resistance, usually because they have a process that they're trying to guard that they believe they need to be in control of. And those are usually called, I call them silos of excellence, right? They can be really excellent what they do, but the way you interact with them or the way the people work inside of there make it so they're their own thing. And when you approach the data fabric side of things, we have a couple of states we're working with right now on this data fabric concept. And you really have to hammer home that it's what the process is trying to do is you have a box in there. You do need to change a little bit in order to integrate within the entire ecosystem. And the last thing you want to do is always, be holding on to those keys to that, because once you open, in my opinion, once you open up that data, get that data set out there and people can start using it, you look great. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. The whole point of this is to take the systems you have to mature them to a point where the people are even more successful to that. So, oh, there we go. Somebody likes, Caitlin likes, doesn't like the silos. I had a boss of mine, I always use the term silo of excellence. And he said, well, I like silos of excellence, but they should have perforations in the silo. And of course, since I live in Iowa, the corn would fall out if that was the case, right? So that's a corny joke. No one's laughing at it, but that's okay. How do you drive home the importance of good data? Yeah, that causes problems. I know there are different tricks you can try. There's different tricks you can use. Like one of them is, okay, before it goes to the master data management layer, let me roll back here to let me roll back to a slide that I can actually talk to. How about we go here? So as they're collecting data down here, that could be, let's say it's garbage data, right? And it can't go to the master data management unless it, through that ETL process, unless it has some type of, let me go back, sorry. Always getting dizzy. Go back to this slide right here. That's why you have this ETL. So it can't be used in this visualization reporting. So if it's garbage in, garbage out, don't let the garbage get into here, but put forth some effort to talk to them about how they can improve their data. Sometimes it's the way they're collecting data is why it's bad, right? Sometimes it's, hey, they don't have quality checks inside their systems. That could be an opportunity, especially if it's database driven, to put some database integrity in there. So, the fields are in there. They may not be using pull downs, free-form text, and that could be on the collection side. So it's really working with them to get that to work. And some of it can just be fixed as it goes into this data warehouse. There's other theories that you take this ETL that's in here in the staging area and you move it to the top side of the vault structure. And this is what's the beauty of this model is you can move things around. And the theory is, even if the data is bad, put it in the warehouse anyway. And artificial intelligence, machine learning, things like that will eventually flush out which data is good and which data is bad. It's kind of a little forward thinking, but so I would say just keep working with them. I know it's frustrating. I've been there, done that. And sometimes I've been the bottleneck with bad data and some of the stuff I've done in the past, but work with them to find out where their issue is and then show them the importance of having good data. Hope that helped with the question. What percent of time should a professional devote to this type of assessment? Aha, good question. So when I was at Iowa DOT, when SlimJig first came out, I can't remember what year that was, 2014, 2015. Anyway, I adopted it. It would literally take me to do the assessment because I had an overview of the entire organization and I tried my best to keep thumbs on what was going on and understand the culture and stuff. To do the SlimJig model, I spent about an hour to 2 hours doing the assessment, the SlimJig assessment. And then I would take that and then I'd repeat it the next year. And it was interesting. One of the assessment pieces was had to do with training. And so we implemented a training plan. We built a training plan. We ended up getting enterprise license agreement with training services in there from Esri. And that really bumped up our training. But what happened bumped up that maturity for that. But what happened was we actually started ignoring some of the other pieces of it, and we had actually some things go backwards in maturity because we weren't monitoring that as closely. So I would say, if with SlimJig model, a couple 5 hours a year and reflecting, doing the assessment, reflecting on it, and then the work comes into, how do you implement change or process improvements or improvements to those weak points? That's where your time comes in. Oh, that was a long answer for a short question there, but
I think that was pretty good. I was curious about that as well. David snagged a question I was thinking about answering.
and that's the thing. If next year, if we're in person, we could always redo this presentation. This is where the perfect lunch talk and after hours type talk where you can talk through these things, because everyone's organization is different. They all have the same types of issues, but they're just, you handle them differently depending on the organization.
Yeah, agreed. Well, we can hang on here for a couple more moments, but while we're waiting for those last questions to trickle in, just a reminder that we do have the wrap-up session from 12:45 to 1. So once you guys are finished here, feel free to migrate over to that space. And as Eric mentioned, that's where our door prizes are going to be. There is a pretty big one for the last, so I would encourage everyone to attend for the wrap-up just in case. I said last night, Eric, I don't know if you were on for last night. I stepped away to make dinner and I got a prize and I wasn't there. So.
Oh no. No, I was driving back from Chicago last night, so I missed the. Oh, so yeah, attend that. You have to be there to win, right?
Yep, be there to win. That's how it works.
All right. Well, if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me on this data fabric concept from GeoDecisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget to fill the exit poll on your way out, just for some helpful information. I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you again, Eric.
All right. Thank you.